Why the Rams Super Bowl window is still open. Does Sean McVay need to change his philosophy in the preseason? And why we can thank a snowstorm for Sean McVay. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you want to find the video version of the show, join the party on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Just got past 7K subscribers, all thanks to you. And let us know, what do you think the Rams Super Bowl window is still open? My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for over a decade, the Dodgers for Dodgers Nation. Now I'm covering the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio network, ESPN 710 LA. He's entered his 8th season covering the team, the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him at Travis Rogers. On today's show, we've got a snowstorm that made Sean McVay the coach of the Rams possibly. Does Sean McVay need to change his philosophy in the preseason? But today, Travis, we begin with the Rams Super Bowl window. So Jason McIntyre, of course, he's Colin Cowherd's sidekick. He says that the Rams Super Bowl window is shut. He had some bold takes on the Rams. He says, I can see them being one of the worst teams in the league, and thus they decide to pull the trigger and trade Aaron Donald, basically their only good defender. Look at the PFF stats for their defense. It's abysmal. I know they won the Super Bowl going with Big Stafford, Cup, and Donald, but then everything fell apart. They lost Jalen Ramsey, their best cornerback, who basically shut down one side of the field. And he's saying that, hey, they're going to reboot and totally blow this thing up. My opinion is I still think that, yeah, it's not as wide open as it was, of course, in 2021. But I think in 2024, it's cracked up again. I think it's cracked the jar. I wouldn't say that this Rams Super Bowl window is closed. But what say you, Travis?
Well, I want to go back to what Les Sneed said when they were getting ready after the end of last season. They're preparing for the draft. They're preparing for free agency. And I think he said it's not a tear down and it's not a rebuild, but rather it's a remodel. So to kind of go from there to the whether or not the Super Bowl window is open, I think that window's under construction. I don't think it's open right now. I don't think that there's a scenario, barring a radical change in how they have their personnel by the time we get into the season, that this is a Super Bowl caliber roster. I just don't think that it is. I for a long time, for the last few years, it was that you had the quarterback, you had the wide receiver, you had Aaron Donald, but those guys are still there, but almost none of the rest of it is. And the NFL is not the NBA, where if you have a big 2 or a big 3, you got a chance. In the NFL, you need like a big 20. You need really good guys on both sides of the ball. You need depth on both sides of the ball. You need stars for sure, but you need to have a complete roster. You need to be able to have some redundancies in some of these places. And right now, I don't think that the Rams do. It is the NFL. I think that the path to success is always there because of the way that the schedule is set up, because of the way that the league just is inherently lets teams that aren't expected to be good get good pretty quickly. But having seen this team for as long as I have over the last few years, this is the weakest roster they've come into a season with in a very, very long time. It's not a Super Bowl caliber roster. It's just not.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree with you at this moment. At this moment for this team, this roster right now, if you look at their odds on FanDuel, they're plus 6,000 to win the Super Bowl. That's 23 out of 30 teams. So yes, this year, I would agree with you that the roster isn't where you need it to be to say, okay, they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders for 2023. When I look at this window, I look at this group, I look at this core. So to me, I feel like he was saying, okay, this is nailed shut, that with this group and Donald and Stafford and Cup and McVay, that, hey, you're going to move on from this core. I look at the fact that 2024, you have the cap space, almost $60 million. You have all your draft picks. And the reality is you have some of the best players in the league at premium positions. You have Aaron Donald still has some prime years left, in my opinion. Cooper Kupp still has some prime years left, in my opinion. Sean McVay, one of the best coaches in the league. And also, you got Matthew Stafford. You have a Super Bowl winning quarterback. So you add that to the fact that an organization is committed to winning like the Rams are. I think 2024, they could be right back in the mix as Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, I wouldn't use nailed shut if we're going to continue this window metaphor a little bit. It's taped shut, right? It can be opened again. It's just not ready to go yet. It needs some more work. I'll go back to something that Les Sneed said to me on my radio show, which was, you need to know where you are in your window. You need to know how open it is. And what he said was, as long as we have Aaron Donald, that is the window. I agree with you that Aaron Donald does provide you with a lot of optionality moving forward, but he can't do it by himself. You're going to have to get more help on that side of the ball. You're going to have to get more help on the offensive side of the ball. Like you said, Doug, they're going to have some money to spend. They're going to have a first-round draft pick. If this season goes the way a lot of the pundits think it'll go, it might be a very high first-round draft pick. So this window could kick itself wide open very, very quickly all over again. But for the 2023 season, I think that it's going to be a very difficult case to make that this team is getting ready to make a run. I don't think it's going to take them long to reopen it, but I don't think it's open right now.
Exactly. And this is an organization that they know that, hey, if they have a shot, if they think they're a piece away, they're going to go out there and give those draft picks up. They're going to go out there and sign guys. But kind of the issue I have with this statement is saying, okay, this window is shut, as if when you look inside this window, I see a Lombardi trophy, right? I see Super Bowl 56. We've talked about proof of concept. Their proof of concept has absolutely worked. I think when you talk about closed window, I mean, you can talk about other teams in this league. And yeah, I think that when you look at this roster as a whole, for them to have success in 2024, you almost needed to have this gap year in 2023 to see if you can hit on any of these rookies, any of these young players. And you can talk about those 20 guys you talked about, talk about the depth pieces, because without those depth pieces, without those guys on the margins, you're not going to be able to succeed. And also, too, you're not going to be able to have money to sign these premier talents. I mean, you're talking about 3 guys that are taking up a lot of your cap space. So I definitely agree that this season, you have to be pretty much downright delusional to think that they're going to be Super Bowl favorites. I mean, anything that can happen in this league, sure, we know that. But I think 2024, they're right back in the mix, and I don't think this Super Bowl window is shut. If I thought it was shut, I would say then fine, trade off Donald, trade Kupp, trade Stafford, move off these guys and just blow this thing up down to the studs. But I just don't think they're there yet. But coming up here, Travis, in our next segment, we're talking about the preseason. Does Sean McVay need to change his philosophy for the preseason? That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
All right, D-Mac, before we do that, let's talk about our friends at eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Eiler to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. So whether you're prepping for the draft like right now or scouting the waiver wire later in the season, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And let's start right here. Maybe you get lucky, you get that first pick overall. If you are making that first pick overall in fantasy football drafts here in 2023, 49ers running back Christian McCaffrey is a guaranteed fit. A healthy McCaffrey is guaranteed to see well more than the 300 touches again in his first full season in San Francisco, and is the centerpiece of the 49ers offensive engine. McCaffrey checks all of the boxes, including his talent and his usage, high floor and ceiling. Run with CMC as the guaranteed fit at number 1 for a smooth ride to another year of big numbers. Vinny Eiler from Locked On Fantasy Football is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being perfect and a perfect fit. Same goes for your vehicle. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts, you name it, eBay Motors has it. And they'll make sure it's the right fit for your car, because eBay Guaranteed Fit helps you understand exactly what part you need for your vehicle the first time. So go forth, switch gears, crank that AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you'll know you'll always be set up for success from the get-go. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. From the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check, get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply.
And we're off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And also, we're available over on YouTube. So find us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And a special shout out to our everyday listeners. We appreciate you. And you can join the Everyday Listeners Club too. Just hit that subscribe button and listen every day. And you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. Now, Travis, here in our second segment, we're talking about the preseason. And I think it's going to be a very interesting topic to discuss because this is a very different preseason for the Rams. You don't have all these established veterans. You don't have all these locks at multiple positions. And we know Sean McVay does not like to play his expected starters in the preseason. He likes to go with the health route. He wants to keep guys healthy. That is what he prioritizes. But I think this year is different. I think that Sean McVay absolutely needs to give more reps to his projected starters in the preseason. I think it's absolutely paramount to this team's success in 2023.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit different, but I would be surprised if it's a lot different because I obviously health is something that they prioritize and making sure that their best players, whoever they decide that those guys are the most healthy that they're going to be week one, that they want to hit the ground running in that very first week and that they'll kind of figure some of the intricacies out a little bit as they get deeper into the season. I don't think that you're going to see something wildly different than we've seen in the past, though. Maybe instead of playing none in the preseason, they play very sparingly. But I think Rams fans are going to be a little disappointed if they expect to see your regular guys out there because Sean McVay, I've heard him talk about it. They're going to get their work done in practice. They're big believers in very efficient practice and very efficient workouts. They're going to get work done in those joint sessions that they have with some other teams, that the preseason is the preseason. And Sean McVay not only changed it the way that the Rams do it, but you look around the rest of the league, about half the league does it the way that Sean McVay does it right now. And I wouldn't expect it to change a whole bunch.
Yeah, if you look at this preseason schedule for the Rams, you look at what they have at stake. I mean, there's just so many position groups where every single position really is up in the air. I mean, you look at the defense outside of Aaron Donald, Ernest Jones. You're talking about a cornerbacks group where, I think you can give Kobe Durant a starting spot. I think you can give Jordan Fuller a starting spot and possibly Darion Kendrick. But other than that, I think you need those reps for those guys. And really the position I'm looking at too, defensive line as well. I think you got Copeland, you got Brown, you got Turner, you got Murchison. They need reps to develop, but I'm looking at that offensive line. That's where I'm looking at as far as they were decimated by injuries last year. Yes, there's no question about that. But also, you have to find the five best guys, and they need to build chemistry. And I think, of course, Havenstein, he starts at right tackle. Steve Avila, I think he's going to lock at left guard. But I think outside of that, I mean, you got Shelton, you got Allen going for the center spot. You got the left tackle spot with Jackson and Noteboom. I mean, I think there's a lot of questions there. So I definitely think that it kind of depends on the position group. But kind of getting back to what you were saying about these joint practices, I went to one in 2018 with the Ravens. And, you had ones going against ones. It gets very intense there. And I agree. They definitely get some big-time reps and action there.
Yeah, that's where they're going to, that is their preseason. You know, if you are somewhere around my age, if you remember football in the 80s and the 90s and what the preseason football looked like, there was a very typical, progression of how it went. Week 1, you'd play a series. In week 2, you'd play a quarter. In week 3, you'd play a half. And then in week 4, you wouldn't play at all. Well, that's out the window. They're getting those ones-on-ones, like you mentioned, in those joint practices. And I think that that's going to continue. I also agree, though, Doug, with something you said. I think that the unit that probably will get the most look, the team that the unit that you're looking at to try to figure out exactly what it is that you have, is that offensive line. I would look at it a little bit differently than you. That I think I'd be stunned if Rob Havenstein plays in the preseason. Stunned. I don't think he's going to take a single snap. I don't think Brian Allen will play a lot in the preseason as well because he's had some injury history along the way, and I do think that he has the inside track on that job, so I think that he's probably locked in at center. Those other three spots, whether it's Bruss, who got hurt in the preseason last year but never really played, he needs some reps. You got Avila, who's a new guy, so you probably want to get an idea of what he has. And then, of course, you've got the left tackle situation. And Joe Noteboom had that job on lock going into last season. He didn't play very well. And they had kind of a revolving door over there because of the injuries. Well, revolving door everywhere, really. But I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some of those guys maybe get, maybe not a million reps, but some reps in the preseason, because I think those jobs are probably more open than the other two.
Because you don't need tons of reps, right? You just need some in-game action. I think there's certain position groups that need it more than the others. And I agree, there are some locks. Of course, Aaron Donald, hey, he's going to sit for sure. Cooper Kupp, I think even Higbee, I think even Van Jefferson. I mean, there are guys that you don't need to see in the preseason. But I think it's the rookies. I think it's the second-year guys that absolutely need the reps. Even Matthew Stafford, I'd be totally fine if he doesn't see any action in the preseason. He most likely won't. But, hey, we've seen Tom Brady. He got big time preseason snaps at one point. He played until he was 44. He's playing the preseason until the final year of his career. So it's not like we haven't seen in the past. And I think some of the warning signs in the past we saw in 2021. We saw Noah Wolford. We saw Bryce Perkins. And then when Wolford got his opportunity, he didn't have very many meaningful game reps. So sometimes it does come back to bite you. And I think the conversation then becomes is the difference between a practice where it's very intense versus a preseason game. So I definitely think it could benefit them. And I think, look, we know on one hand, this works. This has largely worked for Sean McVay. There's no question about that. You stay healthy, save for Cam Akers in 2021 with the Achilles injury. For the most part, you've remained healthy, and that's helped you in the regular season. But I think if there's 1 year to maybe change the philosophy, it's this year. And then when you get those established veterans, you go back to what worked for you for so many seasons.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad you brought up Brady, because there's just, you're right. There's just philosophical differences on how you do this. That Bill Belichick and Andy Reid, they play their guys, right? Tom Brady played in the Patrick Mahomes plays in the preseason, and Andy Reid and Bill Belichick believe that it's an important part of the development. Sean McVay does not, right? And I don't think it's we're going to do it like this based on what we're doing in any given year. This is just how he does it. Like, you go back to his first year with Jared Goff, you didn't see him. And at that point, Jared, if anybody needed reps, it was Jared Goff. And he went in there very, very briefly, and that was about it. I don't think this is we need to do it because we're inexperienced, or we need to do it because we're having position battles. I think it's more of a philosophical decision that this is not where we get our best work done. It's not worth whatever risk there may be when guys actually do get hit in the preseason. And I get it. Andy Reid does it with Patrick Mahomes, and great. That's wonderful and everything else. But I would be very curious as to how everybody would feel about that if something bad happened to one of those guys along the way. Sean McVay's just not taking the risk.
Exactly. I mean, you don't want to risk injury in a meaningless game, but I kind of want to go to a quote that Sean McVay had in the 2021 season. It was about those depth pieces, right? I mean, they sat out 35 guys during that preseason, but this year, those depth pieces could be starters. If you look at this roster and the way things are panning out. And yeah, it is about health, and we're talking about Disney. Almost feels like Sean McVay is almost Nemo's dad sometimes. He's Marlin. He wants him to stay safe. He doesn't want guys to get injured. So yeah, there is a little bit of that.
Does that make Aaron Donald the Barracuda?
He's the Barracuda for sure. Yeah, classic. But I mean, look, the preseason's gonna be very interesting. I think the best too, at the very least, we're gonna get Stetson Bennett, right? We're gonna get Stetson Bennett. So we are gonna see some reps. I think Tutu Atwell's another guy that can benefit. I mean, we talk about how great Tutu Atwell is in practice, how fast he is, how much he dominates, and how good he looks. But hey, let's see it in preseason. Have him gain some momentum. So I think there's a lot of positions that can definitely benefit. But I think it's going to be a very different feel for the Rams this preseason. And hey, Sean McVay, he's a proven coach. You got to trust what he does at the end of the day. In Sean, we trust. But could Sean McVay have been Kyle Shanahan if not for a snowstorm? That's coming up here in our final segment on Locked On Rams. And welcome back to Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your two-time Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams, free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you want to check out the video version of the show, join the party on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and let us know, do you believe the Rams Super Bowl window is still open? Also, a special shout-out to our everyday listeners. We appreciate you, and you can be an everyday listener too. Join the club. Membership is free, and you won't miss a thing about your Los Angeles Rams. But here, Travis, in our final segment, we're talking about a snowstorm that helped get the Rams Sean McVay. Now, Les Sneed was on the Athletics Jordan Rodriguez podcast, the Playcallers, fantastic podcast, by the way, highly recommend. And Les Sneed said the Rams were unable to conduct an interview with Kyle Shanahan due to a snowstorm, which led to the Rams hiring Sean McVay back in 2017. He told Rodriguez, unfortunately, we could never interview Kyle. We had it scheduled. Then it was a snowstorm in the New England area. So Providence, when we interviewed Matt Patricia and Josh McDaniels, the snowstorm hit that part of the country and we couldn't get to Atlanta. We couldn't get there. We did ask Kyle, hey, would you like to FaceTime? He didn't really want to do that. So at that point in time, we passed on the interview, that weather event, and whatever occurred because of it, it definitely changed the course of the NFC West. So we know what went on to happen. The Rams would end up with Sean McVay. He goes on to win a Super Bowl, appeared in 2 Super Bowls, has established himself as one of the best coaches in the sport. And Kyle Shanahan, he's done a really nice job with the San Francisco 49ers, but hasn't got that Lombardi trophy. But Travis, what is your reaction to this? The fact that the Rams end up with Sean McVay instead of Kyle Shanahan because of a snowstorm.
Well, a couple of things here. Number one, I'm a big believer in things work out the way that they're supposed to work out, right? If Kyle Shanahan was supposed to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, he would have done a FaceTime. The weather would have been different. He would have gotten here. They would have waited. They would have waited for the weather to get better, et cetera, et cetera. Didn't work out that way. You could not have asked for a better coach than the Rams have had over the last 6 years than you had in Sean McVay, right? That Sean McVay is exactly what they needed, not just because he's a brilliant coach, not just because they've won a lot of games. He completely changed the culture of that organization. When the Rams got here, and I'll go back to my first season doing the pre-half and post on their radio network on ESPN LA, team wasn't just bad, D-Mac. It was so uninteresting. It was just a dreadful watch. It wasn't fun to look at. And think about that. Think about how fun this team has been under Sean McVay. So not only did they get the right guy as far as a winning culture goes, but in just creating a new culture was incredibly important. That's part one. Part two is that the Rams had keyed in on Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan shows you that Les Snead and Kevin Demoff know what they're doing. Shows you that they're able to identify good young talent because those two guys are kind of the gold standard for young coaches in this league that know what they're doing. And if their final 2 candidates were Shanahan and McVay, that's pretty good scouting and development right there. That's knowing which guys you want to go. It gives me a great deal of confidence going forward about the other people that they might be identifying, the other people that they want to bring into the organization, because those 2 guys have been as good as anybody else in the league over the last 5 or 6 years.
Absolutely. And you just look at Sean McVay. I mean, he feels like the Hollywood head coach. He feels like the guy that was born to lead this Rams organization. And I look at some of Sean McVay's wins and some of his big wins. You look at Super Bowl 56, that's a quarterback and that's a receiver in Stafford and Kupp that led a drive to come back and win that Super Bowl. Would you have had that with Kyle Shanahan? I mean, this is a guy that has struggled in the fourth quarter. Kyle Shanahan has been outscored 52-0 since the third quarter of Super Bowl in 2016 when he was the coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. And I just don't think, of course, the Rams win a Super Bowl with Shanahan as their head man.
Yeah, maybe not. Right? It's a really hard thing to kind of rewind and run it back in a different scenario. They got who they were supposed to get. Sean McVay has been as good as you could ask for. But if you just said to me, snap your fingers, and you know that Kyle Shanahan is the coach that he's been in San Francisco, would you want him running your team? Sure. I mean, I'd take Sean McVay first, but I'm not getting too far down the list before Kyle Shanahan, especially when we're talking about the younger guys. We know there's the Mike Tomlins and the Belichicks and the Andy Reids and the Pete Carrolls and those guys, but that's more of the old guard. And as far as the new guard goes, those 2 guys are at the top, and that they were at the top of the list for the Rams, I think bodes really well for the guys to make those decisions.
And what's really interesting to me when they talk about this as well is the fact that the 49ers, they were very interested in Sean McVay. So this could have been flip-flopped. Imagine if McVay is the head coach for the 49ers and they're the team that's winning the Super Bowl. But how about this, Travis? Up 20-10 with 6:23 in the Super Bowl versus the Chiefs. They're up 28-3 with 4:44 left to go against the Falcons. I mean, that is a gut punch. Teams are 29-3 in the Super Bowl when leading by 10 points through 3 quarters. Kyle Shanahan has coached in 2 of those losses. So, yeah, I'm definitely taking this opportunity to kind of go on the 49ers
throw,
there, and I kind of have
one
to
more
do
in
that.
there, D-Mac, right? What about the NFC Championship game a couple of years ago that Kyle Shanahan has beaten the Rams like a drum over when these two guys have been together, except for the time where it mattered the absolute most. And they had another lead slip through their fingers. Maybe it wasn't quite the 28-3 in the Super Bowl with the Atlanta and New England, but San Francisco was in a position to go back to the Super Bowl again a couple of years ago, and the Rams came back and beat them the one time that it really had to go their way. It did.
Exactly, right? I mean, hey, you have 49er fans screaming at the screen saying, run the ball, run some clock, and he just doesn't do it. He still puts in the air. And I don't know how I'm going to find a way to connect this to UCLA, but I'm going to do it any way I can.
Give it a shot.
And I just want to say, Travis, that before John Wooden accepted the job for UCLA, he was going to accept the job for Minnesota, but because of a snowstorm, Minnesota couldn't contact him, so he ended up accepting the job at UCLA. And then after they were able to get connection, he said, look, I already accepted this job for UCLA. I'm going to honor my commitment. And he goes on to win 10 titles with the Bruins. So Sean McVay, he is going to be the Rams' John Wooden. He's going to win 10 Super Bowls. That's all I'm saying.
Hey, look, that Sean McVay is the coach of the team this year is a bit of a surprise to me, right? At the end of the season, I thought he was leaving. I thought that he had, to tie it back to your Bruins again for a second, D-Mac, I was thinking this was a Dick Vermeil situation, right? A guy that had come into the league, had a great deal of success, but had burned so hot for such a short period of time that it's just, hey, man, I need to take a break. I'm going to go do some TV. I'm going to go make a pile of money, and then I can come back. He could have taken a 10-year break and come back and still been one of the youngest coaches in the league. That he's here, I think, is a bit of a surprise for me. I think he knows what he's getting into for this season. I think he knows what they can do moving forward. And I would rather, there's not one person I would rather have than Sean McVay on the sidelines for the LA Rams.
I would pay to know how much his TV contract offer is. I mean, do you think it's insane levels Tom Brady like?
Maybe not Brady, but I bet it's Tony Romo like. I bet it's one of the Troy Aikman like, one of those. I don't know, $20 million a year, something that seems to be the going rate for the Brady. Was it what, $35 million? By the way, I'm still putting this out. I don't think you're ever going to see Tom Brady in a booth ever. When they announced that, I didn't think it was going to happen. Maybe now with the crypto thing costing Tom Brady a few bucks, it's changed a little bit along the way. But when McVay wants TV, it's going to be there. When he's ready to go do, because look, I mean, not to get too far off this, we can talk about this another day. The everydayers have heard we talk about this before. Sean McVay has money, and the money will always be there. If he wants to do TV, it's always there for him. There is nothing that matches the juice of an NFL game. There is nothing that matches the juice of being the head coach in an NFL game. Looking down there and saying, oh, they should have run the ball there is not the same thing as deciding whether or not you're going to run the ball there and living and dying with all those decisions. Sean McVay lives for the juice as I can see it.
You can tell, and that's how he gets his rocks off, Coach.
Yeah.
But I will say, you're not going to see Tom Brady, of course, as a broadcaster, because now he's going to be on the Kardashians now, apparently. So that's definitely where he's going to be on TV. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100% that the juicer is still flowing. He still has that fire inside of him. And I definitely think that there's no way he's going to hang it up as a head coach until he has another big Super Bowl run. That's just how confident I am that Sean McVay definitely wants to pursue another Lombardi trophy before it's all said and done. You never know. Maybe this guy just wants to be a full-time head coach forever and just go down as one of the all-time greats. I think that's definitely in the cards for him. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DMac_LA. You can follow Travis at Travis Rogers, the people's champ. Go follow him. And until next time, whose house is Locked On Rams house?